He had no education, no money, no family to fall back on. At 13 years old, he could not even read or write. He slept in forests, ate scraps, and survived winters by taking whatever odd job he could find along the road. You would think a child like that, illiterate and penniless and raised in a village so remote it did not even have electricity or running water, could never become one of the most influential names in the history of fashion. Well, Louis Vuitton did not just survive. He built an empire, a brand worth hundreds of billions of dollars, a name so powerful, so iconic that people today wait years on waitlist just to carry a bag with his initials on it. So how did a poor, abandoned French farm boy, a kid who walked nearly 300 miles alone through the wilderness, become the man behind the most valuable luxury brand in the world? To find out, we have to go back to the summer of 1821. August 4th, 1821. A child is born in Anchai, a tiny hamlet buried deep in the Jura mountains of eastern France. The Jura region is beautiful in the way that only untamed places can be. Dense forests, steep ravines, and almost no connection to the outside world. There is no electricity, no running water. The nearest school is 6 miles away, and that might as well be 600 miles when you are a farmer's child, expected to work from sunup to sundown just to help the family survive. Louis Vuitton's father, Xavier, was a miller and a farmer. His mother, Corinne, made hats to bring in a little extra money. And I want you to notice that detail, because it matters. Corinne was a maker, a craftswoman. She took raw materials and shaped them into something that people would pay for, something that combined utility and elegance. That sensibility, the idea that an ordinary object could be made beautifully, would define her son's entire life's work. But in 1821, in a one-room stone house in Anchai, none of that was visible yet. There are no records of Louis ever attending a single day of school. Instead, he woke before dawn and worked the fields alongside his father. He learned to use his hands, how to cut wood, how to repair things, how to shape materials into something useful. He watched his father manage the mill, understanding how raw inputs became something valuable through skill and labor. He watched his mother make hats, how her fingers moved with precision and purpose. It was not exactly a childhood. It was labor. But those hands, rough and calloused before he was even 10 years old, would one day craft luggage for emperors. What Louis had, what nobody in Anchai could yet see, was an eye. He noticed things. He noticed how objects fit together, how materials responded to stress and weather, how the same piece of wood could be made useful or useless depending entirely on how it was worked. In another life, with different circumstances, that gift might have been noticed early, nurtured, educated. In Anchai in the 1830s, it was just another farm boy's calloused hands. And then things got much worse. Louis was just 10 years old when his mother died. For a child already growing up in poverty at the edge of civilization, it was devastating. Corinne had been the warmth in the household, the one who made hats with careful, delicate hands, the one who perhaps passed down to young Louis a sense that ordinary materials could be transformed into something refined. Without her, the house went cold in more ways than one. His father remarried. The new stepmother was, by all accounts, manipulative and cruel. She dominated the household. She made Louis's life miserable. And Louis, stubborn, proud, ambitious even at that age, could not stand it. He would not stand it. In the spring of 1835, at 13 years old, Louis Vuitton made one of the most audacious decisions in the history of fashion. He left, not to a nearby town, not to a cousin's farm. He decided to walk to Paris. Paris, which was 292 miles away, across mountains and rivers and roads he had never traveled, in a country where he knew nobody, with nothing in his pockets and no plan whatsoever. He slipped away in the night, and he started walking. I want you to really let that sink in for a moment. A 13-year-old boy, illiterate, with no money and no contacts, deciding to walk almost 300 miles through 19th century France, alone. No maps, no phone, no one coming to look for him. Just a pair of wooden clogs and a will so fierce it defied every rational explanation. The journey would take him 2 years. 2 years of sleeping in forests. 2 years of taking whatever odd jobs he could find, chopping wood, cleaning stables, helping craftsmen with tasks that required an extra pair of hands. But here is what is remarkable. Those 2 years did not break Louis. They built him. Every craftsman he helped taught him something. He picked up skills working with metals, with fabrics, with wood. He learned how different materials behaved, how they bent, how they held weight, how they wore over time. He was essentially getting a masterclass in material craftsmanship from hundreds of tradesmen across France, and he did not even know it. Think about the geography of this for a moment. The Jura Mountains to Paris, across plains and rivers, through the cities of Lyon and Dijon, through countless small towns where he had to convince complete strangers to give him work in exchange for food or a place to sleep. He was doing this at 13, 14, 15 years old. Most children that age are in school or at home with their parents. Louis Vuitton was essentially teaching himself about the world by living through it, one cold night and one day that built callouses at a time. He arrived in Paris in 1837. He was 16 years old. Alone in a city of 1 million people, in the middle of an industrial revolution that was reshaping everything. Paris. At that moment was electrifying and terrifying in equal measure. Steam engines were transforming transportation. Railways were beginning to connect cities. The wealthy class, the aristocrats, the merchants, and the diplomats were traveling more than any generation before them. And when wealthy people traveled, they needed someone to handle their things. They needed someone who could protect their silk dresses and their fine coats and their precious personal effects during long, rough journeys by coach, by train, by steamship. Vuitton, the boy from the mountains who had spent 2 years sleeping rough and learning every craft he could get his hands on, walked straight to one of the most upscale districts in Paris. He had the audacity to present himself to Monsieur Romain Maréchal, one of the city's most respected boxmakers and packers, and ask for a job. Maréchal looked at this disheveled teenager from the provinces, with his rough hands and his mountain accent and his complete absence of any formal credential, and saw something. Maybe it was the competence behind his eyes. Maybe it was the confidence in the way he spoke about materials and craft. Whatever it was, Maréchal hired him as an apprentice. It was one of the luckiest decisions in the history of fashion, though nobody knew it at the time. Now, you might wonder, what exactly was a boxmaker and packer in the 19th century Paris? This was not just some random trade. At the time, it was a highly specialized and enormously prestigious craft. A master boxmaker did not just build boxes, they built custom-fitted containers for every conceivable item, shaped precisely to hold a countess's gowns, a diplomat's documents, a merchant's fragile wares. Then they packed those items personally, ensuring nothing shifted or broke during transport. For the wealthy elite of Europe, a master packer was as important as a butler. You trusted your most prized possessions to their hands. Louis thrived. He had an instinct for it that went beyond simple skill. He understood materials. He understood weight and balance. He understood how to make something both functional and beautiful. Within a few years, He had built a reputation in Paris's fashionable circles as one of the finest apprentices Maréchal had. The wealthy clients who came to the shop began to ask specifically for Louis. He worked there for more than a decade, absorbing everything, watching, learning, observing how wealthy people lived, what they valued, what frustrated them, what they were willing to pay a premium to solve. He was, without realizing it, conducting market research through pure proximity to power. He understood his clientele better than anyone because he watched them every day. And he was cultivating relationships with a class of people he had never imagined interacting with as a boy in the Jura Mountains. And then, on December 2nd, 1851, everything changed. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup d'etat. A year later, he became Napoleon III, Emperor of the French. The re-establishment of the empire would reshape Paris, reshape France, and reshape Louis Vuitton's entire future. Napoleon III's wife was Empress Eugénie de Montijo, a Spanish countess who had married into the most powerful position in France. She was, by all contemporary accounts, a woman of extraordinary taste and extraordinary needs. Her wardrobe was legendary, her gowns were masterpieces, and she moved between multiple imperial residences constantly: the Tuileries Palace, the Château de Saint-Cloud, her villa in Biarritz. Her clothes had to travel with her. They had to arrive perfectly intact, perfectly pressed, perfectly arranged. In 1853, Empress Eugénie hired Louis Vuitton as her personal boxmaker and packer. She charged him, reportedly, with packing the most beautiful clothes in an exquisite way. Think about what this meant. This boy who had walked out of the mountains of eastern France with nothing, who had slept in the forests of Jura as a teenager, who had no education, no family connections, no formal training, was now personally responsible for the wardrobe of the Empress of France. The appointment gave Louis something more valuable than money. It gave him access, because when the Empress of France trusts you with her most precious belongings, every aristocrat, every diplomat, every member of the European elite pays attention. Orders began flowing in from the highest echelons of French society: princes, counts, foreign royalty. They all wanted the man the Empress had chosen. There is something almost poetic about this. Louis Vuitton had arrived in Paris as a boy nobody wanted, a vagrant teenager from the provinces, unwanted by his own stepmother, with nothing to offer the world. Now the most powerful woman in France was trusting him with her silk gowns. The journey from that forest floor in the Jura Mountains to the imperial wardrobes of Empress Eugénie had taken 20 years of relentless, grinding, focused work. But he had made it. But Louis was not content to simply be the best packer in Paris. He had a vision that went much further. In 1854, the same year he married his wife, Clémence Émilie Pariot, who was 17 and who reportedly transformed the rough-shouldered craftsman into something resembling a Parisian gentleman. Overnight, Louis Vuitton took the most important leap of his life. He opened his own shop. The sign outside read, "Securely packs the most fragile objects, specializing in packing fashions." The address was 4 Rue Neuve des Capucines. It was modest, but it was his. He had gone from a homeless teenager in the forest to the proprietor of his own workshop in Paris in less than 2 decades. That alone would be an extraordinary story. But Louis Vuitton was just getting started, because 4 years later, in 1858, he would change luggage forever. You see, Louis had spent years working with, examining, and critiquing the luggage of his era. And there was a problem that nobody had solved. A problem so fundamental that every traveler in the world was forced to simply accept it as an inconvenience of life. All trunks of the period had rounded, dome-shaped tops. The logic was simple. A rounded top allowed rainwater to run off, protecting the contents. But the consequence was equally simple and deeply frustrating. You could not stack them. Every trunk had to be carried individually, loaded one at a time, occupying enormous amounts of space on trains and ships. For travelers moving with a dozen trunks, which was entirely normal for wealthy Europeans of the 19th century, this was a logistical nightmare. Louis Vuitton thought about this problem differently. What if instead of using leather with a dome top, you used a lightweight, waterproof canvas and made the trunk flat? What if you sacrificed the dome, the solution to rain, by finding a material that was inherently water-resistant? He experimented. He tested fabrics. He found his answer in a grey canvas he would later call Trianon canvas, lightweight, water-resistant, durable, and crucially able to be constructed with a flat top. His trunk was rectangular. It could be stacked. 6 of them could go where 2 of the old dome-shaped trunks had been. He also added other innovations that seem obvious in retrospect, but were genuinely radical for their time. Covered internal frames protected contents from damage during transport. Cross-banding with thin leather straps at stress points added reinforcement without unnecessary weight. Customizable compartments inside allowed a traveler's belongings to be organized precisely rather than jumbled together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Most historians of luggage and design consider Louis Vuitton's 1858 trunk the birth of modern luggage as we know it. Within a year, he had to expand into a larger workshop in Asnieres, a village just north of Paris, just to keep up with the orders. By 1859, that workshop sat on nearly 50,000 square feet, a massive operation for a man who had started with nothing but a sign that read, "Securely packs the most fragile objects." And he was receiving orders now, not just from French society, but from international royalty. Ismail Pasha, the Khedive of Egypt, placed personal orders. The world was becoming his clientele. But success, as Louis Vuitton was about to learn, comes with a shadow. The better your work, the more people want to steal it. By the early 1860s, competitors had noticed what Louis was doing. They began copying his canvas designs almost immediately. The imitation was blatant. Other trunk makers would present essentially identical products at slightly lower prices and undercut him. For a craftsman who had poured genuine innovation into every design decision, this was infuriating, and it would become a defining battle, not just for Louis himself, but for the brand he was building. He fought back the only way he knew how, by innovating faster than anyone could copy him. He introduced new canvas patterns, stripes, and checkerboard designs, staying always one step ahead. He stamped his trunks with identifiers. He developed a lock system. He was, in essence, inventing the concept of luxury brand protection in real time, decades before the term brand meant anything in the modern sense. By the late 1860s, Louis Vuitton's workshop in Asnieres employed dozens of workers. He had received orders from Ismail Pasha, the Khedive of Egypt. He had clients across Europe and beyond. In 1867, he won a bronze medal for his innovation at the Exposition Universelle in Paris, one of the great world's fairs of the era, an event that attracted millions of visitors from across the globe. That bronze medal was more than an award. It was public validation, on one of the largest stages in the world, that what Louis Vuitton was creating was genuinely, objectively, better than anything else in the field. He was building, at this point, not just a business, but something closer to a movement. Wealthy travelers did not just buy Louis Vuitton trunks because they were functional. They bought them because owning one said something. It said that you had access to the finest things, that you moved through the world with taste and discernment. Louis Vuitton, the illiterate farm boy from Angers, had, without fully articulating it, and perhaps without even intending to, invented the luxury goods category. The idea that a product could be desirable not just for what it did, but for what it meant. He was, by every measure, a success. A self-made man who had built something real and lasting from absolutely nothing. And then, in July 1870, everything he had built was destroyed in a matter of weeks. The Franco-Prussian War began on July 19, 1870. The French Empire under Napoleon III, the same empire that had elevated Louis Vuitton from craftsman to imperial supplier, was about to collapse. Prussian forces swept through France with shocking speed. Paris itself was besieged. What followed was months of chaos, destruction, and civil war that shattered the French Empire entirely. Louis Vuitton had no choice but to flee with his family. The man who had once walked 300 miles through the wilderness as a 13-year-old now found himself a refugee again, displaced, uncertain, watching everything he had built threatened by forces entirely beyond his control. When the siege of Paris finally ended on January 28, 1871, Louis returned to Asnieres. What he found would have broken most people. The workshop was in ruins. His tools had been stolen. His materials were gone. His staff had scattered. The business that had taken him 16 years to build, through ingenuity, through relationships, through relentless hard work, had been almost completely destroyed. Louis Vuitton was 50 years old. He had started with nothing once, and now, it seemed, the world had put him back at nothing again, or so he thought. Here is what I find so remarkable about this moment in Louis Vuitton's story. Most men, most successful men who had achieved what Louis had achieved, would have taken this as a sign. They would have seen the war, the destruction, the refugee displacement, as the universe telling them their chapter was over. They would have retreated, started over in a smaller way, or perhaps given up entirely. Louis Vuitton did the exact opposite. He saw opportunity in the wreckage, because properties in Paris were cheap after the war, because competitors had gone bankrupt, because he had survived things far worse. He had survived being an abandoned 13-year-old sleeping in a forest in the middle of winter. A war was not going to end Louis Vuitton. Within months of returning, he had opened a new shop, not in Asnieres this time, not in a suburb, in the heart of Paris itself, at 1 Rue Scribe, right next to the prestigious Jockey Club, in one of the most fashionable and aristocratic addresses in the city. He had taken the destruction of his business and used it to rebuild bigger, better, and in a far more prominent location than he had ever occupied before. The new shop was explicitly targeted at international luxury clientele. Louis even had handbills printed in English, a forward-thinking move that signaled his intention to reach beyond France, beyond Europe, to build something global. For a man who had never received a single day of formal education in his life, this was a remarkably sophisticated piece of business strategy. He understood that the future of luxury was not local, it was international, and the business that came back was bigger than anything he had built before the war. The 1870s and 1880s would represent the full flowering of everything Louis Vuitton had been building toward since that day he walked out of the mountains as a child. Order after order came pouring in from the world's elite, not just French aristocrats, but royalty from across Europe and beyond. Alfonso XII, King of Spain, Ismail Pasha of Egypt, members of the Russian Imperial Court. Louis Vuitton was no longer just a Parisian trunk maker. He was the trunk maker for the world's most powerful people. He continued innovating relentlessly. In 1872, he introduced a new canvas with red and beige stripes, a design that became immediately recognizable as distinctly Vuitton. In 1876, he refined it with beige and brown. In 1888, he introduced the damier canvas, a checkerboard pattern that he officially trademarked with the phrase "Marquez le Vuitton déposé," which was the registered L. Vuitton brand. This was not just a design choice, it was a legal and commercial strategy. Louis was asserting in writing on every product that what you were looking at was his, and only his. I want you to notice what's happening here. Louis wasn't just making luggage. He was building the concept of a brand, a visual identity so distinctive that anyone who saw it immediately knew what they were looking at. This was radical thinking for a craftsman in the 1880s. Most trunk makers simply made trunks. Louis Vuitton was creating something that transcended the product itself. He was creating a symbol. He was building the template that virtually every luxury brand in the world would eventually follow, that the mark itself carries meaning, that the pattern carries prestige, that people don't just want the object, but the identity it confers. In 1885, he opened a shop on Oxford Street in London, the first Louis Vuitton location outside of France. This was another enormous moment. London was the center of the British Empire, the financial and cultural capital of the most powerful nation in the world. Opening a shop there was a declaration that Louis Vuitton belonged not to Paris, but to the world. By this point, his son Georges had joined the business, bringing new ideas and new energy. In 1886, Georges invented a lock mechanism for the trunks so sophisticated, so technically ingenious, that he reportedly challenged the great escape artist Harry Houdini himself to break out of one. Houdini could not. And in 1892, Louis Vuitton did something else that was remarkably ahead of its time. He launched a catalogue, a printed document showing the full range of Louis Vuitton products, so that international customers could browse his offerings and place orders from anywhere in the world. It was, in some ways, the 19th century equivalent of an e-commerce platform. Louis Vuitton understood intuitively, before the language for it existed, that the future of luxury retail was about reach, about getting your product in front of people wherever they were, not just wherever you happened to have a store. On February 27, 1892, at the age of 70, Louis Vuitton died in Asnieres, France. He was buried near the workshop he had built from nothing in the village where he had established his family home. The business passed to his son, Georges. But what Georges inherited was not simply a trunk-making company. It was something far more valuable: a reputation, a clientele, an identity, and a visual language that millions of people had already learned to associate with the highest possible quality. And Georges, to his extraordinary credit, understood exactly what he had been handed. He did not rest on his father's legacy. He built on it in ways that would define the brand for the next century and beyond. There was still one problem that had plagued Louis Vuitton from almost the moment his trunks became famous: counterfeiting and copying. Competitors had been mimicking Louis' designs for decades, and despite his innovations, the new patterns, the stripes, the damier canvas, the imitators kept finding ways to replicate and undercut. Georges had to solve this once and for all. In 1896, 4 years after Louis' death, Georges Vuitton sat down to design something new, something that could not be easily copied, something that would serve as both a tribute to his father and a declaration to the world about what Louis Vuitton meant. What he created was the monogram, the interlocking LV initials, the quatrefoils, the floral motifs, influenced by Art Nouveau, the dominant artistic movement of the era, and possibly by the Japanese aesthetic philosophy of Kamon that had captured French artistic imagination in the late 19th century. The monogram was intricate enough to be extraordinarily difficult to replicate, distinctive enough to be instantly recognizable, and elegant enough to function as a genuine work of design art. Georges patented it aggressively across multiple countries between 1896 and 1897. Now here is the thing that nobody could have predicted, not even Georges. What had been designed as an anti-counterfeiting measure became something far more powerful than anyone had intended. The monogram became a status symbol. It became the thing wealthy people wanted precisely because everyone recognized it. Walking down a Parisian boulevard with a Louis Vuitton trunk bearing that monogram meant something. It communicated wordlessly to every person who saw it. I have access to the finest things. I travel at a level most people can only dream of. I belong to a world of quality and refinement. The monogram became the visual shorthand for an entire philosophy of luxury, craftsmanship, exclusivity, heritage, and the transformative power of beautiful, functional design. And it has never changed. The monogram canvas you see on Louis Vuitton bags today is essentially identical to the one Georges designed in 1896 as a tribute to his father. Think about that for a moment. We live in a world of constant rebranding, of trend cycles that last 18 months, of logos redesigned every decade by agencies charging millions of dollars. The Louis Vuitton monogram has been essentially unchanged for over 130 years. That is not inertia. That is not laziness. That is the most profound possible proof that Georges Vuitton in 1896 got something exactly right. Today, Louis Vuitton operates over 460 stores in more than 50 countries. It is consistently ranked as one of the most valuable luxury brands in the world, with a brand value exceeding $30 billion, and parent company LVMH valued at well over $400 billion. The little workshop in Asnieres, where Louis once employed 20 craftsmen, now employs 170 artisans, producing bespoke commissions and iconic creations. The family home stands as a museum, open to visitors who want to connect with the origins of one of history's most extraordinary business stories. Under LVMH, Louis Vuitton has continued to evolve while maintaining its foundational identity. Creative directors like Marc Jacobs, who took the role in 1997, expanded the house into ready-to-wear fashion while preserving the heritage. The iconic collaborations that followed with artists like Takashi Murakami in 2003, whose multicolor monogram reimagination became one of the most celebrated luxury products in history, showed that the brand Louis built was flexible enough to encompass modernity without losing its soul. Virgil Abloh's revolutionary tenure brought in new cultural conversations. Pharrell Williams brought his own vision. Each era built on what the previous one left behind. The entire structure, the entire legacy, traces back to that flat-topped grey canvas trunk that a self-educated craftsman designed in 1858 because he noticed that round-top trunks could not be stacked. That is the through line. That is what makes this story so astonishing to me. Louis Vuitton did not build an empire through wealth or education or family connections. He built it through observation, through the discipline of noticing what was wrong with the world around him and having the audacity to fix it, through the patience to master his craft across 17 years before he ever opened his own shop, through the resilience to be destroyed by a war at 50 and come back within months better positioned than before. And this is remarkable, truly remarkable, when you hold it against where Louis Vuitton began. A child who could not read or write, a farmer's son in a village without electricity, working the fields before he was old enough to understand what opportunity meant. A boy who lost his mother at 10 found himself under the thumb of a cruel stepmother and made a decision that should not have been possible. To walk away from everything he knew and walk towards something he could not yet see. He walked 292 miles on foot. He survived 2 years in the wilderness. He arrived in a city of strangers with nothing but his hands and a ferocious determination to build something. What drove Louis Vuitton? He left no famous manifesto, no lengthy interview record, no TED Talk explaining his philosophy. But his life, examined closely, reveals his answer: quality as a form of respect. Respect for the materials you work with. Respect for the people who trust you with their most valued possessions. Respect for the craft itself, which never stops demanding more from you than you gave yesterday. There is a quote attributed to him that captures this spirit. The quality is remembered long after the price is forgotten. Whether he said it in exactly those words or not, it describes perfectly the bet he made with his life. That if you make something genuinely extraordinary, the world will eventually find it. He was right. Louis Vuitton's legacy is not just the brand. It is not the monogram canvas or the trunks or the stores on Fifth Avenue and the Champs-Élysées. His legacy is the proof, living, breathing, commercially thriving proof, that the circumstances you are born into do not determine the life you are capable of building. The skills you pick up wandering in the wilderness, the lessons you learn from craftsmen who barely knew your name, the resilience forged in the coldest, hardest nights of a childhood nobody would choose, all of it matters. All of it becomes the foundation for something no one could have predicted. A 13-year-old boy, alone in the forest, walking toward Paris with nothing to his name. He had no idea he was walking toward history, but he kept walking anyway. And that is how a poor French boy created Louis Vuitton.